My homophobic brother sabotaged my life as a teen. Now he wants to reconcile, but I'm not ready to forgive him, even after he broke down in tears. I'm 19M. My brother is 21 and is my only sibling. I realized I was gay from a young age and came out at 14. My parents were supportive from the get-go, but my brother was absolutely not. He tried telling me I wasn't, or that I was just trying to get attention, and tried to get me to change my mind. When that failed, he called me a freak, diseased, said I was going to hell, even though we aren't that religious, and made it clear he didn't want a relationship with me. He outed me at school, my friends already knew, and tried to get others to join in, but no one really cared, and nothing much changed. Needless to say, I vowed to limit contact with him as much as possible, but the comments continued until he moved out when he turned 18 for school. I've since gotten into a great school and have completed a year and a half. I'm in a relationship, my grades are the best they've ever been, and everything seems to have fallen nicely into place. My brother sent me a Facebook message back in August. He started by apologizing for how he'd treated me, saying he was depressed before and was stuck inside his own head, fell into the wrong crowd online that reinforced his bitterness towards others. He said he'd gotten treatment for his depression, feels more confident than he has in years, and was on the upswing and wanted to meet up to repair our relationship. He said he was proud of me for being gay and supported me and apologized for taking so long to make it known. I didn't respond, nor did I respond to his happy birthday message in September. Then he started texting me saying he understands if I'm still hurt, but he'd love nothing more to make up for the hurt he caused. I haven't responded to these either. Here's where my boyfriend says I'm TA. Over the holidays, we were all back at my parents' house. I had a great time seeing my family, except him. Each time he'd ask about me or try to talk to me, I'd give him one-word answers or clam up. He offered to get a game for me as a gift, but I declined. He pulled me aside to apologize face to face, reiterating the stuff he said before, but I also cut that short and walked away. Meanwhile, I talked with my parents like normal and was very open with them about the happenings of my life, typically within earshot of him. The day we left, I said my goodbyes and found him by my car crying. He said he understands why I'm closed off to him and that he regrets how it turned out, wished me well, and went inside. I told my BF about this when I got back and he's pissed and called me an AH. BF says it's clear my brother feels badly about how he used to be, and he's changed, and that to throw that all back in his face is a dick move. My parents agree and say he's a good person, but ultimately feel it's up to us. Personally, I've gotten so used to the idea of not having a brother that I don't know if there's anything left to salvage. He made his choice to sabotage me then. Is it really my problem he regrets his actions now? Aida? Update 1. I didn't think I'd be back here so soon after the original post, but a lot has happened since then. Buckle up because this is about to get a little more complicated than I expected. First off, let me address the comments. When I posted about my situation with my brother, I had no idea it would blow up the way it did. The sheer amount of people telling me I should forgive him, that family is everything, was honestly exhausting. I get it. Some people are all about family, but I guess that's easier when you haven't been emotionally torn apart by your own sibling for years. Still, some of the advice was helpful, and I took a step back to consider my feelings. So, like I mentioned in the original post, my brother had been reaching out to me. His messages, apologies, and attempts to reconnect were still sitting in my inbox, unread. After reading some of your comments, I thought about actually replying to him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it right away. There's just something about reopening old wounds that makes my stomach churn. I've spent years trying to heal from what he put me through, and it feels like if I let him back in, I'm opening myself up to more pain. But then, life has a funny way of forcing your hand. About a week after I posted, I got a call from my mom. She didn't beat around the bush. She told me my brother had been hospitalized. My first instinct was to ask, what happened? She was kind of vague at first, just saying he hadn't been doing well mentally and had collapsed at work. Now, my brother and I might not be close, but I'm not heartless. I felt that familiar pang of worry in my chest, and I knew I had to at least see if he was okay. So I called the hospital. The nurse on the other end was nice enough and told me that he was stable, but that they were keeping him overnight for observation. Apparently, he'd been pushing himself too hard at work, and between that and his untreated mental health issues, his body just gave out. My mom didn't tell me this, but apparently his boss had found him passed out in his office and called 911. When I asked the nurse if I could come visit, she told me they were limiting visitors due to some policy or another, but family was allowed 1 visit per day. I almost laughed. Family, right? Still, I thought about going, but I couldn't shake the feeling that showing up would just stir up old feelings, on both sides. So, I didn't go. I told myself I'd go the next day if he was still there. It wasn't like he was in critical condition or anything, so I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. Plus, I had schoolwork piling up, and a project due for one of my classes. I thought about messaging him, maybe just sending a "hope you're okay" text, but I didn't even do that. The next day came, and I was hit with a wave of guilt. My mom called again to let me know he'd been discharged and was going to be staying with her and my dad for a while, at least until he was feeling better. She didn't ask why I hadn't visited, but I could hear the disappointment in her voice. I get it. She wants us to have that perfect sibling bond again. But the truth is, I'm still not sure I want that, and I don't think I'm a bad person for feeling that way. A few days later, I ended up back at my parents' house for dinner. My boyfriend had been pushing me to at least see how my brother was doing, saying it might help me find closure or whatever. So I gave in. When I walked in, my brother was sitting on the couch, looking like a shell of the person I remembered. It was jarring, to say the least. He had lost weight, his skin was pale, and he had these dark circles under his eyes that made him look 10 years older. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy for him, but it was quickly overshadowed by the years of resentment I've built up. Dinner was awkward. My mom tried to make small talk, but it was clear there was this giant elephant in the room that nobody wanted to address. My dad, ever the mediator, kept asking me about school, trying to steer the conversation away from anything too personal. But my brother? He barely spoke. He just sat there, staring at his plate, occasionally glancing up at me with this weird, almost hopeful expression. Like he was waiting for me to say something, anything, to acknowledge him. I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. After dinner, I tried to leave as quickly as possible, but, of course, my brother cornered me before I could make it out the door. He asked if we could talk for a minute. I wanted to say no, but I also knew that if I did, it would just make things worse. So, I reluctantly agreed. We went into the backyard, and he started with the same old apology I've heard 100 times by now. But this time he seemed more genuine. He didn't just say he was sorry for how he treated me when we were younger. He admitted that he had been scared. Scared of me, scared of what my being gay meant for our family, scared of what it meant for him. He said he had been dealing with his own issues and took them out on me because I was an easy target. I don't know if that's supposed to make me feel better, but it didn't. It just made me angrier. I told him that being scared doesn't excuse the years of torment he put me through, that I didn't owe him forgiveness just because he was going through his own crap. He started crying. Like, really crying. Not the performative kind of crying where you just want sympathy, but the kind where it felt like he was finally breaking down all the walls he had built up. He said he knew he didn't deserve my forgiveness, but that he hoped we could at least try to be brothers again. I didn't know what to say. I was so used to hating him, to holding on to all that anger, that the idea of letting it go felt impossible. So I just walked away. When I got home, I told my boyfriend what had happened, and he gave me that same look he always does when he thinks I'm being too stubborn. He told me that maybe my brother really had changed, that people are capable of growth, and that if I shut him out now, I might regret it later. I snapped at him, told him he didn't understand, and went to bed feeling more conflicted than ever. The thing is, I don't know if I want to have a relationship with my brother. I've built my life without him in it, and I've been happy. But now, with him trying so hard to make amends, I can't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's something worth salvaging, or maybe I'm just fooling myself. All right, here we are again. I thought after the last update things would calm down, but honestly, I feel like life is throwing curveballs at me from every direction. It has been a wild few weeks, to say the least. Let's dive into it. So, after the last encounter with my brother, I was sure I'd stick to my guns and keep my distance. I've spent years building walls around myself when it comes to him, and I've gotten pretty comfortable with those walls. They keep me safe, or at least, that's what I've been telling myself. But of course, things didn't go as smoothly as I had planned. My boyfriend, bless his heart, has been gently pushing me to give my brother another chance. He's always been the let's all be happy and love each other type, which I admire, but it can get exhausting when you're someone like me, who's got a lot of baggage and isn't as quick to forgive. We had a couple more discussions about the whole situation, and I could tell he was trying really hard to see things from my perspective. But there was still this underlying tension. He'd say things like, "You don't have to forgive him, but maybe give him the chance to show you he's changed." I didn't know how to feel about that. It was like everyone around me was expecting me to just magically get over years of hurt, because my brother suddenly decided to have a change of heart. It all came to a head one evening when I got another text from my brother. This one wasn't like the others, though. It wasn't a long apology or an explanation about why he acted the way he did. It was simple. He said, "I miss you." That threw me off. I wasn't expecting him to say something so vulnerable, I guess. I stared at the message for what felt like forever, trying to figure out how to respond, or if I even should. Part of me wanted to just ignore it like I had been doing with all his other messages. But there was another part of me, a much smaller part, that felt curious. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's like I wanted to know if he really meant it, if he actually missed me, or if this was just another one of his attempts to manipulate me into forgiving him. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I spent the rest of the night overthinking, as usual. My boyfriend was watching TV next to me, and I could tell he knew something was up. He didn't say anything, though, just let me sit there and stew in my own thoughts. Eventually, I decided I couldn't keep avoiding this forever, so I typed out a response. I kept it short, just like his message. I said, "Why?" I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then tossed my phone onto the couch like it was about to explode. My heart was racing, and I felt sick to my stomach. I wasn't ready for whatever he was going to say next, but at the same time, I felt like I had to hear it. He didn't respond right away, which only made things worse. I spent the next few hours checking my phone obsessively, like a teenager waiting for a crush to text back. It was ridiculous, but I couldn't help it. Finally, just as I was about to give up and go to bed, my phone buzzed. His response was longer this time, and I could feel my anxiety ratcheting up as I opened the message. He said, "Because I've been thinking a lot about how things used to be before all the crap I put you through. I've been remembering how we used to play video games together, how we'd sneak snacks from the kitchen when Mom wasn't looking, and how we'd stay up late talking about random stuff. I miss having a brother. I miss you." I didn't know how to process that. It felt like a punch to the gut. I had almost forgotten about those moments he was talking about. In my mind, everything between us was overshadowed by the years of bullying, the cruel words, and the constant feeling that I wasn't good enough for him. But now, here he was, bringing up these memories I hadn't thought about in so long, and I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't respond that night. I needed time to think. But the thing is, when you start thinking about stuff like that, it's hard to stop. For the next few days, I kept replaying those old memories in my head. I remembered how, when we were kids, we were inseparable. We'd do everything together. I remembered how, when I came out at 14, I wasn't just losing a brother. I was losing my best friend. That was the part that hurt the most, I think. The betrayal wasn't just because of what he said to me, but because it felt like he had thrown away everything we had together in one fell swoop. Eventually, I decided I couldn't just leave things hanging like that. I needed closure, or at least some kind of resolution, even if it wasn't what he was hoping for. So, I asked him to meet up. I figured it would be better to have this conversation in person, where I could actually see his face and hear his voice, instead of hiding behind a screen. We met at a coffee shop in town. I got there early, probably because I was nervous, and didn't want to keep him waiting. When he walked in, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes were a little wrinkled, and he had that same haunted look in his eyes that I'd seen the last time we were at my parents' house. But there was something else too, something softer, more vulnerable. We sat down and ordered our drinks, but neither of us touched them. The silence was heavy, and I could feel the tension building with every passing second. Finally, he broke the silence. "I know I've said it before, but I really am sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was a horrible brother to you. I know that. And I don't expect you to forgive me or forget what I did. I just want you to know that I'm trying to be better." I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him, trying to figure out if he was being sincere or if this was all just another ploy to get back into my life. But the more I looked at him, the more I realized that he wasn't faking it. He was really hurting, and he was scared of losing me for good. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I finally said, my voice cracking a little. "You hurt me in ways I can't even explain. You made me feel like there was something wrong with me, like I didn't deserve to be happy or loved. And that's not something I can just forget." He nodded, his eyes downcast. "I know. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I want to be your brother again. Even if it takes years for you to trust me, I'm willing to wait. I just want to try." That hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so long convincing myself that I didn't need him in my life, that I was better off without him. But now, sitting there across from him, I wasn't so sure anymore. Part of me wanted to believe him, to believe that he had changed, and that we could rebuild what we'd lost. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt so deeply, was still skeptical. I didn't know if I was ready to let him back in, and I told him as much. "I'm not saying we can go back to the way things were," I said. "But maybe we can try to figure out where we go from here." He looked up at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. He smiled, just a little, and nodded. "I'd like that." We didn't hug or anything. We just sat there for a while, sipping our coffee in silence. But the tension that had been hanging between us felt like it was starting to lift just a little. I don't know what's going to happen from here. I'm still not sure if I'm ready to fully forgive him, or if I ever will be. But I'm willing to take it one step at a time. Maybe we'll never be as close as we once were, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we can find a new kind of relationship, one that works for both of us. And maybe, just maybe, we can heal. Update 3. All right, I'm back for what might be the final time. It has been a roller coaster, and honestly, I didn't expect things to end up where they have. But life, as usual, has a way of throwing surprises at you when you least expect them. After the last update, I kept my distance from my brother for a bit. I needed some time to process everything that had happened in that coffee shop. We had opened the door to a potential reconciliation, but it wasn't like all the years of hurt and anger magically disappeared overnight. If anything, it left me feeling more confused. I had spent so long keeping him at arm's length that now, with the possibility of rebuilding our relationship on the table, I wasn't sure if I even knew how to be his brother anymore. My boyfriend, as always, was there to listen. After I told him about what happened at the coffee shop, he gave me one of those looks that says, "I told you so," but he didn't say it out loud. Instead, he just asked me how I felt about it. And honestly, I didn't know. I told him that part of me felt like maybe my brother really had changed, but another part of me was still scared of getting hurt again. My boyfriend didn't push me one way or the other, just told me that whatever decision I made, he'd support me. So I decided to take things slow. For a few weeks, my brother and I texted here and there. Nothing too deep, just casual stuff. He'd ask how school was going, I'd ask how his recovery was coming along, that sort of thing. It felt weird, trying to have these normal conversations after everything that had happened between us. But at the same time, it was kind of nice. It was like we were feeling each other out, trying to figure out if we could actually have a relationship again without stepping on each other's emotional landmines. Then one weekend, my mom invited both of us over for dinner. I almost said no, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to see how things went with the whole family together. Plus, my boyfriend was all about me trying to mend things with my brother, so he encouraged me to go. I reluctantly agreed, and we headed over to my parents' house. When we got there, my brother was already sitting at the dining table, helping my mom set everything up. He looked better. I mean, he still had that tired look about him, but he wasn't as gaunt and pale as before. I guess the time at my parents' house was doing him some good, at least physically. Dinner started off awkward, as expected. My mom was doing her best to keep the conversation light, asking us about school, work, whatever, while my dad mostly sat in silence, nodding along. My brother wasn't saying much, just picking at his food. I could feel the tension building, like we were all just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And of course it did. At one point, my mom, bless her heart, asked if my brother and I had been spending time together lately. I could tell she was fishing for some kind of happy family moment, and my brother must have sensed it too, because he looked over at me waiting for my response. I wasn't sure what to say. We hadn't really spent any time together outside of texting, and I wasn't ready to jump into some kind of buddy-buddy relationship with him just yet. So, I gave a vague answer about how we had talked a bit but were taking things slow. My brother nodded, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Then he did something I wasn't expecting. He turned to my parents and said, "I've been meaning to talk to you guys about something." My stomach dropped. What was he going to say? Was he about to dredge up everything that had happened between us in front of our parents? I wasn't sure I was ready for that conversation, especially not over dinner. But instead, he started talking about his time away. He told them about the depression he'd been battling, how he'd fallen in with a bad crowd online that fed into his bitterness and anger. He admitted that he had pushed a lot of people away, not just me, and that he had lost sight of who he was. He apologized to them for all the pain he had caused over the years, not just to me, but to our whole family. I don't think I was the only one surprised by this. My mom got teary-eyed, my dad looked like he didn't quite know how to respond, and I just sat there, not sure what to make of it all. It was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen my brother, and it was kind of unsettling. He wasn't the same guy who used to torment me. This was someone else entirely. After dinner, my mom pulled me aside and asked me what I thought about everything my brother had said. She was hopeful, of course. She wanted us to fix things, to be the brothers we used to be. But I told her what I'd been feeling, that I wasn't sure if I could ever fully forgive him, that it was going to take time, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever be ready to have the kind of relationship she wanted us to have. She didn't push me, thankfully. She just hugged me and told me that no matter what happened, she was proud of me for even considering giving him a second chance. A few days later, my brother texted me again. This time, he asked if I'd be willing to hang out with him, just the two of us. He said he understood if I wasn't ready, but that he'd like to spend some time together if I was open to it. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep things at a safe distance. But another part of me, probably the part that remembered all those good times we had when we were kids, felt like maybe it was worth giving it a shot. So, I agreed. We ended up going to this arcade we used to go to as kids. It was one of those nostalgic places that hadn't changed much over the years. Same old games, same neon lights, same sticky floors. It felt strange being there with him after everything, but in a way, it also felt familiar, like maybe we were both trying to recapture something we'd lost along the way. We played a few games, mostly in silence. It wasn't the same as it used to be, but it wasn't as awkward as I thought it would be either. At one point, we ended up at the air hockey table, which had always been our favorite game as kids. We played a few rounds, and for the first time in years, I actually saw my brother smile. Not one of those forced, awkward smiles, but a real one. After we finished playing, we sat down with some sodas and talked. It wasn't a deep conversation or anything, just casual stuff about life, work, and school. But it felt like a step in the right direction. I still wasn't sure if I could ever fully trust him again, but I could feel some of the anger I'd been holding on to for so long starting to fade. A few weeks passed, and we hung out a few more times. It was slow progress, but it was progress. I didn't feel like we were rushing into anything, and I appreciated that my brother wasn't pushing me for more than I was ready to give. He seemed to understand that it was going to take time, and for once, he wasn't trying to force anything. Then, out of the blue, something happened that changed everything. I got a call from my mom one night, and she was in tears. She told me my brother had been in a car accident. It wasn't life-threatening, but he had been taken to the hospital with a broken leg and a concussion. My heart dropped. I hadn't realized how much I cared until that moment, when the thought of losing him, even after everything, sent a wave of panic through me. I rushed to the hospital, my boyfriend driving because I was too shaken to focus. When we got there, my brother was lying in a hospital bed, looking worse for wear, but still alive. I felt this overwhelming sense of relief wash over me, and for the first time in years, I hugged him. He was just as surprised as I was, but he hugged me back. We talked a bit while I sat by his bedside. He apologized again, this time for putting me through all of this, for making things harder than they needed to be. I told him I wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but that I was willing to keep trying. I realized then that despite everything, I didn't want to lose him. Not again. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, helping him get settled at home, and making sure he had everything he needed. It wasn't easy, but in a strange way, it felt like we were finally starting to rebuild something. I'm not going to sit here and say, everything is perfect now. It's not. We've still got a long way to go, and there are days when I wonder if we'll ever fully get past what happened. But for the first time in years, I feel like maybe, just maybe, there's hope for us. My brother is still working through his issues, and I'm still working through mine. But we're doing it together now, and that's something I never thought would happen. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I'm willing to find out. And maybe that's enough.